The Little Mermaid. Disney's The Little Mermaid tells the story of Ariel, a young mermaid who dreams of life on land. She makes a deal with the sea witch, loses her voice, undergoes a magical transformation, and ultimately wins Prince Eric's love, happily ever after. But the original story by H.C. Andersen, it's a dark tragedy of pain and sacrifice. In the original, the mermaid's longing isn't just for love, it's for a human soul. Mermaids live for hundreds of years, but when they die, they simply vanish into sea foam. Humans, however, are granted eternal souls. To obtain one, a human must love her, and she him, binding a piece of his soul to hers. After saving the prince's life and falling in love with him, the mermaid decides that she wants to be human. She seeks out the sea witch. The cost? Excruciating pain, and her tongue. Oh, and she must marry the prince. If not, she will dissolve into sea foam the morning after his wedding. The mermaid accepts, leaving her family and former life behind. When she drinks the sea witch's potion, it feels like a sword is piercing her body. Every step she takes on land feels like walking on knives, and her feet bleeds terribly. She is taken in by the prince and dances for him despite the unbearable pain. But he never falls in love with her. Instead, he marries a princess, believing she's the one who saved him. The sea witch offers the mermaid a way out, and her sisters brings her the tool, a dagger. If she kills the prince and let the blood drip on her feet, she can return to the ocean. But she cannot get herself to kill the man she loves, so she throws herself into the sea, dissolving into foam. And yet, Andersen offers a final twist. Instead of disappearing, the mermaid becomes a daughter of the air, earning a second chance. If she does good deeds for 300 years, she will finally receive a soul. Pinocchio. Disney's Pinocchio is a story of growth and redemption. A wooden puppet, eager to be real, learns the values of honesty and bravery. Sure, he stumbles. Pleasure Island, Stromboli, a monstrous whale. But with Jiminy Cricket guiding him, he proves himself worthy and earns his humanity. But in Carlo Collodi's original Pinocchio, there was no happy ending. Pinocchio isn't just mischievous, he's rotten. From the moment Geppetto carves him, he mocks and mistreats his creator. He steals, lies, and ignores every warning. And his first encounter with the talking cricket? He smashes it with a hammer. Geppetto teaches Pinocchio to walk, and he immediately runs away, which gets Geppetto arrested for allegedly mistreating the puppet. When Geppetto is finally released, he sells his only coat to buy Pinocchio a schoolbook. But does Pinocchio go to school? Of course not. Instead, he gets into even more trouble. He sells the book to get a ticket for a puppet show. He is nearly burned alive, and later nearly fried in a pan. And then, his choices finally catch up to him. He falls in with two criminals, the fox and the cat, who lead him deep into the woods. There, they bind his arms, slip a noose around his neck, and hang him from a tree. Pinocchio is dead. The end. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to end. Collodi originally intended the story of a puppet as a warning against bad behavior, but readers protested they wanted more. His publisher pressured him to continue the story. So Collodi pulled a deus ex machina, introducing the blue fairy to save Pinocchio. From there, his misfortunes continue. He turned into a donkey, he nearly drowned, and was later swallowed by a monstrous fish. But this time, he changes, he learns, he sacrifices, and finally, after proving himself, he becomes a real boy. Snow White. Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a classic fairy tale of good triumphing over evil, a jealous queen, a poisoned apple, and a true love's kiss that brings Snow White back to life. But in the original Brothers Grimm story, there is a bit more torture and cannibalism. The queen isn't just vain, she's a monster. When the magic mirror tells her Snow White is more beautiful, she orders the huntsman to carve out her lungs and liver and bring them back as proof. Oh, and she also intends to eat them. The huntsman spares Snow White, who finds refuge with the dwarfs. But the queen doesn't just try once, she tries 3 times to kill her. First, she laces Snow White's corset so tight that she suffocates. The dwarfs cut her free just in time. Next, she places a poisoned comb in her hair, knocking her unconscious. Again, the dwarfs save her. Then comes the apple. This time, Snow White doesn't wake up. The dwarfs place her in a glass coffin, believing she is dead. But forget the true love's kiss. The prince has nothing to do with her revival. In the Grimm version, the prince becomes so obsessed with her that he carries the coffin everywhere. That is, until one of his servants, fed up with carrying her around, smacks Snow White on the back. The jolt dislodges the poisoned apple from her throat, and she wakes up. The prince, overjoyed, promptly asks her to marry him. A confused Snow White accepts. And the queen? She doesn't just fall off a cliff. At Snow White's wedding, she tries to kill Snow White once again. The prince, fed up with her antics, forces the queen to wear burning hot iron shoes and dance until she collapses and dies. Sleeping Beauty. Disney's Sleeping Beauty is a tale of romance and magic. A princess cursed to sleep for 100 years, awakened by true love's kiss. The evil fairy is vanquished, and Aurora dances into her happily ever after. And for once, the Brothers Grimm version is nearly identical. Their little Briar Rose follows the trajectory: royal birth, a curse, spindle, century-long sleep, and a prince arriving just in time. Good job, Disney. Well, except for one thing. The Grimm tale isn't the original. It's based on a French fairy tale by Charles Perrault. And Perrault? He borrowed from an even older and darker Italian story called Sun, Moon, and Talia by Giambattista Basile. At Talia's birth, astrologers predict that her downfall will come from a splinter of flax. Terrified, her father bans all flax, hemp, and spinning materials from the kingdom. But one day, a peddler woman, completely unaware of this royal decree, spins flax right outside the castle. Curious, Talia invites the woman into the castle. She touches the spindle, gets a splinter under her nail, and immediately drops dead. Heartbroken, her father abandons her body in a distant palace and leaves her there. Then, one day, a king from a neighboring land stumbles upon her. Struck by her beauty, he tries to wake her. When that fails, he carried her to a bed where he gathered the first fruits of love. Yeah. 9 months later, Talia gives birth to twins, Sun and Moon. One of the babies, trying to nurse, sucks the flax splinter from her finger. Talia awakes and is happy but confused to see her children. Then, Mr. Predator returns. He sees Talia awake and casually explains what he did. Instead of her running away screaming, "Their friendship was knitted with tighter bonds." Okay, sure, Basile, why not? The king stays with Talia for a time before he has to return home to his wife. His wife, suspicious of his constant hunting trips, discovers the truth. Furious, she orders the children to be kidnapped and cooked into a meal for her husband. Luckily, the cook hides the children and serves the king some lamb instead. Next, the queen sends for Talia. She accuses her of stealing her husband and orders her to be burned alive. The greedy queen, coveting Talia's fine garments, orders her to remove her clothes first. With every piece of clothing, Talia cries out in grief. The king hears Talia's screams and goes to her, where his wife tells him that Talia will be burned and that he has unknowingly eaten his own children. Enraged, he throws his wife into the fire. The cook is next in line, but surprise! He reveals that he saved the children. Everyone rejoices. Talia and the king marry, and the cook is rewarded. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you write a fairy tale. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of its darkest films. Religious corruption, cruelty, and persecution, all wrapped in stunning animation. But in the end, justice prevails, Quasimodo triumphs, and the villains fall. However, Victor Hugo's original 1831 novel does not offer a happily ever after. Quasimodo is still a deformed, half-blind bell ringer of Notre Dame, abandoned as a baby and raised by the cold and obsessive archdeacon, Claude Frollo. Like in the movie, Frollo becomes consumed with lust for Esmeralda, a young Roma dancer. When she rejects him, he tries to have her executed. Quasimodo also falls in love with her, but to Esmeralda, their relationship is strictly platonic. Her heart belongs to Captain Phoebus, a handsome soldier. But in Hugo's version, Phoebus is a womanizer who only toys with Esmeralda's feelings. One night, Frollo stabs Phoebus in a jealous rage, and Esmeralda is blamed. Tortured, she confesses to a crime she didn't commit and is sentenced to death. Frollo offers her a way out: submit to him or die. She chooses death. Quasimodo rescues her from the gallows and hides her in the cathedral under sanctuary. But Frollo breaks in and tries to assault her. Failing that, he traps her with a reclusive nun, who turns out to be Esmeralda's mother. Her baby was stolen and replaced with a deformed child, which explains how Quasimodo ended up at the cathedral in the first place. An unwanted Roma baby switched with the only friend he ever had. The two women share a brief, joyful reunion before the king's men arrive. Her mother clings to her all the way to the gallows. When she is thrown aside, she dies from the fall. Esmeralda is hanged. Quasimodo, heartbroken and enraged, throws Frollo off the cathedral to his death. With nothing left to live for, Quasimodo vanishes and is never seen again. Years later, two skeletons are found in the charnel house, locked in an embrace, implying that Quasimodo had sought Esmeralda among the decaying corpses and laid down to die while holding her. When separated, the bones crumble to dust. Tarzan. Disney's Tarzan is a story of adventure, love, and self-discovery. A boy raised by apes, torn between two worlds, ultimately choosing the jungle and the woman he loves. It's heartwarming and, of course, completely sanitized, because the original 1912 novel, Tarzan of the Apes, by Edgar Rice Burroughs, is brutal, tragic, and much, much darker. Tarzan's aristocratic parents, John and Alice Clayton, are marooned on the African coast. They manage to build themselves a wooden cabin in the jungle. However, a year later, Alice dies of insanity, leaving John to raise their infant son alone. Then, the apes attack. In the novel, Kerchak isn't a grumpy father figure. He's a bloodthirsty killer. He murders Tarzan's father and turns on the child. But Kala, a grieving she-ape who lost her own child, snatches the human baby and raises him as her own. She names him Tarzan, White Ape. Tarzan doesn't grow up swinging to Phil Collins bangers. He's an outcast, constantly fighting for survival. Smaller and weaker than the apes, he relies on his intelligence. Finding his parents' cabin, he teaches himself to read and write English, and he learns how to use tools. He begins to understand that he is a human, which makes him feel superior to his ape family. However, when his adoptive mother is killed by a local African hunter, Tarzan hunts and torments the tribe, stealing their weapons and killing them for sport. The tribe fears him as a vengeful spirit. Later in the story, Tarzan kills his foster father Tublat, and later he killed the lioness, Sabor. Tarzan's bragging sends Kerchak into a furious rage, so Tarzan offs him too. Tarzan then takes his place as king of the apes. He is a just ruler, but everything changes when Jane arrives. She is marooned with her father and Tarzan's cousin, William Clayton, after a mutiny over lost treasure. Tarzan saves her multiple times, and she falls for him in the jungle. But when she's rescued and returns to America, everything changes. Determined to follow her, Tarzan finds the Spanish treasure, saves a Frenchman, and travels to America. But civilization is another world. When Tarzan reunites with Jane in Baltimore, she is hesitant. The wild man who once saved her isn't as intriguing in a suit and tie. Just before he confesses his love, Jane accepts Clayton's proposal. Then comes a letter, proof that Tarzan is the true lord of the estate. If he speaks up, Clayton loses everything. But Tarzan says nothing. Instead, he lets Jane go, lets his cousin keep his fortune, and walks away from his inheritance, his name, and the woman he loves. Hercules. Disney's Hercules is a lighthearted adventure. A baby stolen from Olympus, raised on Earth, and destined to become a hero. With strength, charm, and a catchy soundtrack, he defeats Hades, rescues Meg, and earns his place among the gods. But the original Greek myth? It's a story of madness, murder, and brutal suffering. First of all, his name isn't even Hercules. The Greeks called him Heracles, meaning glory of Hera. Ironically, Hera hated him. Why? Because Zeus, being Zeus, couldn't keep it in his toga. Heracles was born from one of Zeus's countless affairs, so Hera made his life a living hell. As an infant, she sent snakes to kill Heracles in his crib. He strangled them with his bare hands. But her revenge wasn't over. As an adult, Hera drove Heracles into madness, and in his frenzy, he slaughtered his own wife, Megara, and his own children. When he realized what he had done, he was struck with grief, and he sought redemption. To atone, Heracles was sentenced to 12 impossible labors. These weren't fun action sequences. They were grueling, near-impossible tasks. He fought the Nemean lion, a giant lion with impenetrable skin. He battled the Hydra, a monster that grew 2 heads for everyone cut off. He cleaned the gigantic Augean stables in a single day and captured the 3-headed Cerberus, the guard of the underworld, each labor more brutal than the last. But his suffering didn't end there. His new wife, Deianira, unknowingly poisoned him with a tunic drenched in Hydra's blood, believing it was a love charm. The pain was so excruciating, he built his own funeral pyre, jumped in, and had his friend Philoctetes set it ablaze. His mortal side is consumed by the flames, and the divine half ascends Olympus. Cinderella. Disney's Cinderella is one of the studio's most iconic fairy tales. Glass slippers, talking mice, a fairy godmother, and a happily ever after. But the Cinderella story is ancient. There are thousands of versions told across cultures, from ancient Greece to China, and from Vietnam to Egypt. Disney's Cinderella is based on the 1697 French version by Charles Perrault, and they stick pretty closely to the script. Again, good job, Disney. But Perrault's version is the softened one. The real fun comes from the brothers Grimm. There is no fairy godmother here. Cinderella's mother dies, and on her deathbed, she tells Cinderella to remain kind and pious. Cinderella plants a tree on her mother's grave and prays beneath it. White doves answers her wishes, dropping down dresses of silver and gold. Her father, still alive, but completely useless, watching as she's abused and reduced to a servant in her own home. When the king announces a 3-day ball, the stepsisters mock her. She's allowed to go only if she can sort lentils from ashes, not once, but twice. She succeeds with help from the birds. At the ball, she dazzles the prince. By the 3rd night, the prince is desperate to stop her from disappearing again, so he coats the palace stairs with tar. When Cinderella flees, her golden slipper gets stuck in the pitch. When the hopelessly face-blind prince comes to find the girl who fits the slipper, the stepmother has a plan. She makes one stepsister cut off her toes, the other slices off her heel. The prince is fooled twice, until the birds reveal the blood both times. When Cinderella finally tries the slipper, it fits. She's recognized as the mystery princess. But the stepsisters aren't done. At the wedding, they shamelessly try to worm their way into Cinderella's favor, now that she's going to be queen. The white birds returns and peck out 1 eye each, as a warning, a final chance to walk away. They don't take it, so the birds come back and peck out their remaining eyes. Alright, that was the Disney origins. Let me know in the comments which one you think is the darkest, and why. Thanks for watching. Cheers.